In the vast, unending whiteness of the Arctic, history lies frozen in time, waiting for the patient or the lucky to stumble upon its secrets. Imagine a machine of war, a titan of the skies, vanishing without a trace. This was the fate of a Boeing B-29 superfortress, a marvel of its era, swallowed by the Greenland ice sheet on a clandestine mission in the winter of 1947. For nearly 50 years it remained a ghost, a lost relic of the Cold War's dawn, its metallic skin encased in layers of snow and ice. The story of this particular bomber, known as the Keybird, is not just about a plane crash. The Boeing B-29 superfortress was not just another airplane, it was the technological pinnacle of World War II aviation, a symbol of American industrial might and ingenuity. When it first took to the skies, it was the most advanced bomber the world had ever seen. It was a giant, with a wingspan comparable to a modern airliner. They featured a pressurized cabin, a revolutionary innovation that let crews fly above 30,000 feet. The B-29 was also armed with remote-controlled gun turrets, a sophisticated system with computer-assisted sights. It could carry a staggering bomb load over immense distances. The superfortress is most famously remembered for Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Enola Gay boxcar. But their service did not end with the war. As the world moved to a tense Cold War, the B-29 fleet was repurposed. Its long-range capabilities made it perfect for reconnaissance and surveillance, especially over the vast, uncharted Arctic. These post-war missions were critical, though less public. Planes like the Keybird became the eyes and ears of the U.S. military, flying clandestine patrols to map polar regions and watch for Soviet activity. Crews fought a different enemy, the cold and isolation. They pushed their aircraft in endurance, flying long hours over featureless ice. The B-29 had become a sentinel, a silent guardian on an invisible front line. Its strength and endurance were tested not by guns, but by the relentless power of nature itself. And on one February day in 1947, that power would claim the Keybird forever. On February 21, 1947, the B-29 assigned to the 46th Reconnaissance Squadron lifted off from Ladd Field in Alaska. Its mission was codenamed Project Nanook, a top-secret endeavor to chart the polar ice cap and test for atmospheric radiation, a sign of potential Soviet nuclear tests. The crew, led by Pilot Lieutenant Vern H. Arnett, was flying a polar orbit route that would take them over the North Pole itself. Navigating over the magnetic pole wreaked havoc on traditional compasses, forcing the crew to rely on celestial navigation and dead reckoning in a region where landmarks were non-existent and the weather was a constant, lethal threat. For hours, the Keybird droned on through the perpetual twilight of the Arctic winter. The mission was proceeding as planned, with the crew gathering invaluable data in the frigid, thin air. But deep into the flight, as they were passing over northern Greenland, trouble began. The navigator, Lieutenant Burl Cowan, became disoriented. Unreliable instruments near the magnetic pole, the endless white landscape below, and simple human error led him to make a critical miscalculation. The aircraft was lost, burning precious fuel with every minute that passed. The situation aboard the Keybird grew increasingly dire. Lieutenant Arnett had to make an impossible choice: attempt a controlled crash landing on the unstable surface of the ice sheet. He aimed for a small, frozen lake on the surface of the glacier. The bomber's wheels touched down and the plane skidded for hundreds of feet across the snow-covered ice, its metal belly screeching in protest. Miraculously, the aircraft remained largely intact. It came to a halt in the middle of nowhere. The crew of 11 men had survived the crash, but their ordeal was just beginning. The temperature hovered at a brutal minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Fortunately, the B-29 was more than just an aircraft. It was a lifeline. Using parachutes for insulation and draining the remaining oil to fuel small, life-giving fires in makeshift stoves. They had emergency rations, chocolate bars, crackers, and pemmican. The plane's radio operator, Sergeant Robert Lucky Leader, worked tirelessly to get a signal out, sending a continuous SOS into the ether. Finally, their desperate calls were heard. Within hours of being discovered, all 11 crew members were airlifted to safety at Thule Air Base. Not a single life was lost. For nearly 5 decades, the Keybird rested in its icy solitude, its existence fading into aviation lore. The extreme cold and dry air acted as a natural preservative, preventing rust and decay. The bomber looked as if it had landed only yesterday, its aluminum skin gleaming under the Arctic sun, its machine guns pointed silently at the empty sky. The idea of recovering the Keybird began to take shape in the early 1990s. It was an audacious, almost fantastical dream championed by a small group of determined aviation restorers led by Daryl Greenamure. Their plan was not simply to salvage parts from the wreck, it was to make the Keybird fly again. They envisioned repairing the bomber on site in the heart of the Arctic and flying it off the same frozen lake where it had landed in 1947. In 1994, Greenamure and his team mounted their first expedition. They were astonished by what they found. The B-29 was in remarkable condition. The tires were still inflated. The control surfaces moved freely. The interior was like a time capsule. Logbooks, flight gear, old magazines. They set up a camp on the ice, a small outpost of humanity dedicated to this singular, ambitious goal. They transported 4 newly rebuilt Wright R3350 engines to the site. New propellers, tools, supplies, all of which had to be flown in by a smaller transport plane. The plan was to complete the repairs over the course of a summer, prepare a runway on the frozen lake, and fly the Keybird out before the brutal Arctic winter returned. They installed new engines, they fitted propellers, they started the engines successfully. The roar of the 4 radials echoed across the silent ice, a moment of triumph. They used a small bulldozer to clear a rough runway. The dream felt within reach, but the Arctic had the final say. During takeoff preparations, a small fire broke out, caused by a leaking fuel line from an auxiliary power unit in the rear fuselage. The blaze was tiny at first, with no effective firefighting gear. It spread fast. The crew fought desperately with handheld extinguishers, but magnesium-rich aluminum burned with terrifying intensity. Within minutes, the Keybird was engulfed. The team watched in horror as their dream turned to ash and smoke. The fire burned through the fuselage, leaving a blackened, skeletal wreck. The story of the Keybird is ultimately a tragedy, but one rich with lessons about bravery, obsession, and the indomitable power of the natural world. In its first chapter, it stands as a monument to the courage and resourcefulness of its original crew. Their successful rescue is a powerful testament to the human will to survive. Daryl Greenamure and his team were not treasure hunters. They were preservationists driven by a passionate, almost romantic vision of seeing a ghost fly again. Their ambition and technical skill were extraordinary. They achieved what many thought was impossible, bringing the dead machine back to life on the Greenland ice cap. However, the fiery end of the Keybird serves as a humbling reminder of the limits of human ambition. The team was ultimately defeated not by a lack of skill or determination, but by the same unforgiving environment that had claimed the plane in the first place. The Arctic is a realm that does not easily yield to human will. The fire that consumed the Keybird was a heartbreaking final act, a stark illustration that some relics perhaps are meant to remain as legends, their stories more powerful than their physical form. Today, the blackened, skeletal remains of the Keybird are still there, slowly sinking into the Greenland ice sheet. The wreck is no longer a pristine time capsule, but a scar on the landscape, a monument to a beautiful dream that ended in smoke. The ghost of the ice remains, a silent, haunting testament to both human triumph and human failure.